Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Ziad Abbas. I am part of Mecca staff, Mecca team. We are working in Gaza in different parts, in every area, almost. Before this attack, even before the first attack, major attack on Gaza in 2008, 2009. And part of our work actually focuses with grassroots organizations in Gaza. We try to learn all the time from our own experience. The same for our partners in the ground and our staff in the ground in Gaza. So all the time we try to be prepared. And in 2008, 2009, we learned a little bit, 2012, 2014, 2018, 2021, and now 2023, 24. And you never can be prepared for this kind of genocide. This is bigger than us, bigger than Gaza, bigger than the Middle East. It's genocide. And actually today they are commemorating one of the major massacres that was happened in Bosnia. And right now there is another genocide happening in 2024. And for us, the work in the ground right now, it's happening, reacting for the needs of the people. We have 9 staff members in Gaza. They are working there. While we are talking with you, they are living there. They are part of the community. We have 11 major partners we are working with since the beginning of the genocide. And we have many, many volunteers working inside Gaza. And the work we do, we try to reach to the community with everything it's possible. From food parcels, water, fuels to the hospitals in the beginning, hygiene kits, bathrooms, whatever it's possible, fresh produce. And this work will not happen without our staff in Gaza. The credit go to them, and the credit go to the people of Gaza, because the people of Gaza, the way how they are taking care of themselves, taking their own initiatives to survive, leading our work. They are leading us here. And here I want to honor our staff. And we have amazing leader there. Her name is Wafaa Ad-Dirawi. And this is the one all the time, when we speak with her, the moment we ask, how are you doing? She says all the time, I'm still alive. This is actually the regular answer coming from many people that are living inside Gaza. We are still alive. And yeah, they keep us working. And as Gaza exposed the world these days and show the double standard in this world, how they're treating some people in the way different from others. And I hate to use this example, but it's clear for us. A few days ago, maybe you heard in the news, there were an attack in a hospital in Ukraine, right? And you saw how the news, they were responding to that. But they are not speaking about 36 hospitals destroyed in Gaza. Barely they can mention in our mass media here in the United States or corporate media. But this is our job as people. This is the needs the work we need to take care of. So, as Gaza at the same time exposed the world, but Gaza wake up the world. Wake up all the communities they care about human being, about human rights. We can see the expand of the solidarity movement in every level. We saw that with the students' movement. We saw that in different parts of the world. And still we are witnessing that. How Gaza, they are bringing the people together to struggle for social justice, not just for Palestinians, for everyone. And Gaza is teaching us lessons right now, teaching us lessons about sumud, the steadfastness, teaching us lessons about collective spirit. And these are main two elements to achieve liberation. And they're still teaching us. I'm not going to speak a lot, but for us, work in Gaza, it's something lead our vision all the time. And we will continue the work we do because we have a community like you with us. And as Mecca, we have other staff working too in West Bank. We have 9 in Gaza, 3 in West Bank. And the 3 staff members in West Bank, they are doing the work inside West Bank. At the same time, they are continue to coordinate the work with our colleagues in Gaza Strip. What I want to say, all the time working here from Berkeley, we are scared from that call. You know what I mean. All the time you are on the edge. You are afraid from that call. We have some colleagues, actually out of 9 staff members, 8 of them, they lost their houses totally, destroyed. And they are moving with the community from area to other area. I'm not going to speak about Gaza's situation because our speakers will say more. But the same, it's happening for our staff there. And our work, all the work we do, if you go to our website, you can learn more about what we are doing in Gaza, with numbers, with statistics, about everything. This is coming because we are so lucky we have amazing stuff in Gaza. And we have amazing colleagues they are coordinating. And we as Mecca staff today, we are really lucky to have one of our staff members. She is with us. She came from Bethlehem, from Palestine, which she coordinate the work for us inside Gaza Strip. Josie Shields Stromesness, she's back in the, can you stand, just let the people know you? Josie? Josie is going back in 2 weeks. She will be back with her family to Bethlehem. And we have our staff here. They are with us here. And they are helping in everything. We have Patrick O'Neill in the end, Zachary Habash, anyway. Zachary, Deborah Eger, Christy in the table, Layla Hashimi, and Nancy. Nancy, she's not with us today. And we have other staff, they are not with us today in other work, but here we are. We are Mecca family, and we consider you part of our family. This is the event. We were planning to do it early, but we were waiting a little bit for Bridget to take some time. I don't know how much time. I don't know. I will leave the answer for her. What she did, it's something like amazing. But I have 2 announcements for you. Any of you heard about the ride for Palestine? The bike ride? We have the ride in July 21st. This is the 3rd year we organized the ride for Palestine. And this year it will be big. The riders, we are getting close to 450 riders. They will ride for Palestine. But we have a festival and a lunch for the people you can come. The only thing, do it very fast because maybe it will be sold out. It will be amazing. We have a festival. There will be dabka, there will be music, there will be a lot of cultural things happening there. And the community, they will get together to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza on July 21st in front of Mecca. And we have the other big event is coming again, the bazaar. Are you familiar with the bazaar? It will be in November. Follow us in Mecca and our social media, and follow us. If you are not signed in our emailing list, do it. You can get more information about other activities and updates about the situation in Palestine and our activities in general, and about many other events in the Bay Area. It's not just about us, it's about all the movement in the Bay Area. And by the way, we are so lucky with the solidarity movement in Bay Area. They are amazing. And I'm sure soon they will come back to organize more, to be with Gaza and for many other causes too. Anyway, to go to our event. I know, first I would like to introduce one of our colleagues and a friend of us, friend of Mecca. He is someone known in the Bay Area. He's a doctor, professor. He's everything, actually. Activist, organizer. And he's the one, he solved the problems of the people. If you have a problem, he is the right person to solve it. And if you don't have a problem, actually, still you can go to him. I would like to introduce one of our community leaders in Bay Area and one of our known person here, Jess Ghannam. You are welcome to them. Thank you. I'm not running any election, Jess. Don't worry. I'm running, no. Okay. And she's already here. Bridget Rochios or Rochios, I don't know how to pronounce the second name, but you told me anyone. But I want to say something about midwives. I'm coming from a refugee camp near Bethlehem. It's called Dehesha. We had one midwife. Yeah, you have more. We had one midwife in the camp, and she was the one. The whole camp, they consider her the mother of the camp. Almost every child in the camp, she was in touch with their moms. Most of the people they used to do, I'm speaking about late 70s and 80s, midwives, rarely people they go to the hospital. And she knows the names, and she registered the names actually. Her name is Rabiha. And she was known for the Israeli army. Actually, every time in the curfew, she has her own bag with all the tools she wants. And when she walks, she's like a woman with the Palestinian dress, and she walked. The soldiers all the time, they used to stop her. And they ask her, there is another Hablanim coming. Hablanim in Hebrew means terrorist. And she said it proudly, because any Palestinian is born like right now, how they treat us, they call it terrorist. And she used to say, yes, there is another Hablanim is coming. And in the proud way. And for us, Bridget, I'm not going to speak because I know Jess will speak, but one of the things like in our culture back home, when all the time there are shootings, something happen, our community, actually they don't run to go home. Actually, they run toward the action. They want to go to see what's going on. They want to help. I say it sometimes, they are crazy. They run toward the action. And this is the truth when we speak about Bridget. She saw what she saw in Gaza, and she decided she wants to go to Gaza. She wants to be there. This is why we are very proud and we appreciate your craziness. This is what we need these days. And thank you so much. I will leave it here and for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ziad, and thank you to the Middle Eastern Children's Alliance. And it's such an honor to be here in community with you all this evening. And it's an especially wonderful pleasure and honor for me to be in conversation with Bridget, who is an extraordinary human being. I'm going to make, and I was joking with Bridget beforehand, I was going to say I'm going to make a few brief comments, right? And I told Bridget, anytime a Palestinian man says, let me be brief, you better get some coffee. But we're absolutely delighted to be here this evening, and my brother Ziad, you all don't even know the full story about Ziad, and someday you'll find out about what an amazing human being he is and the work that he's done in Palestine his whole life. So we're very grateful to you, Ziad, and for your leadership at Mecca. And, you know, you're a pillar in the community. So, in case you haven't noticed, the mainstream media seems to be in complete denial about what's happening in Gaza right now. It seems like the focus of the mainstream media right now is about two old white dudes with severe cognitive decline. One is a depraved sexual predator. The other one is a depraved genocidal predator. And we don't hear much anymore about what's happening in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Jerusalem or in Palestine right now. And you might conclude, wrongly I might add, that the absence of coverage about what's happening in Gaza right now is a reflection of calm. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, just in the last 24 hours, the Israeli military issued an evacuation order for the largest city in Gaza, Gaza City. The genocidal campaign to eradicate, to erase, to delegitimize Palestinian existence in Gaza, and that's what this project is, not only continues unabated, but it's accelerating. And this is a typical Israeli ploy, is that when the media attention is somewhere else away from them, they use it as an opportunity to extend their settler colonial genocidal project. And we should not shy away from being very clear about what's happening. From 1947 until now, from settler colonialism to occupation, to apartheid, to genocide, is the logical sequence of events that the Israeli government is engaged in. There's no difference, and don't be fooled by this, between Labor and Likud, okay? It's the same, the project is the same, and the heroic nature of Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and in 48 will continue until our last breath. You all need to know that. We're going to be there. We're not going anywhere. But here we should really be very clear that the infrastructure for healthcare right now is completely destroyed in Gaza. There's no completely functioning hospital. They say 38,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza, but the Lancet just published a report saying that that may be underestimated to up to 186,000 Palestinians may actually have died, which is an extraordinary number for 2.2 million people. It's almost 10% of the population could be exterminated by this genocidal campaign that is being supported by not just supported by the United States, endorsed, enabled. Biden today just sent more 500-pound bombs. They call them defensive weapons. I've been in Gaza. I've been going to Gaza for 25 years. I've been in Gaza when those defensive 500-pound bombs get dropped. And they drop 500-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. There is a famine that's affecting conservatively 500,000 people right now, conservatively. The situation is beyond grave. The world is looking away. I should say the world media and the United States and the Israelis seem to be looking away. But what I will tell you, which is really extraordinary, is that the global solidarity movement has never been stronger, has never been more powerful, and I can tell you that we're on the cusp of something that is truly unique, in terms of the Palestine solidarity movement. And just to take it a step further, because, you know, I've been in the healthcare sciences for my whole career, my whole professional career. The Palestine work I did was always siloed and, you know, like for you, Bridget, you know, we did it separately. But this is the first time that the healthcare workers, physicians, nurses, and other healthcare workers have started to get engaged with the Palestine solidarity movement, and it is extraordinary. Yes, hospitals are being destroyed. Yes, physicians and nurses are being not just killed, but assassinated. Yes, physicians and nurses are being captured and tortured and released. Maybe someday will be released. But the destruction is unimaginable to most people, but what it has done is open the eyes in the healthcare sector to the impact of not just genocide, but the occupation on Palestinians. So for that, we're entering a new era of Palestine solidarity work. Now, Bridget, I mean, I could talk about Bridget forever, but this is going to be about her. It's not about me, right? But I could talk about you forever. And the reason for that is that Bridget's story, like when I put out the call, I said, hey, we're going to do a delegation, and we're going to go to Gaza, right? People would write me back and say, hey, you know, is it safe? Is it okay? I don't know. These are physicians. These are like trauma surgeons writing me back, freaking out. Am I going to be safe? I said, dude, if you're asking me if you're going to be safe, you're not ready to go. You're not ready. And then I get this email from Bridget, and it basically just said, I'm going. Huh? You're going? I guess. That tells you a little bit about what an extraordinary person and human being Bridget is. She didn't second guess it. She confronted her discomfort, her normal discomfort about the process of it, and she went into it with her heart, her body, and her soul. And she has the kind of story that is truly unique and remarkable that we're just so honored that you're going to be sharing with us today, Bridget. So the first question I have for you, and I know, Ziad, you made a joke about this, but it's got to be the first question, right? How the hell are you?
Well, I have a lot of... Oh, now it is. Okay. I have a lot of microphone anxiety. Never can hold it right.
She gave an interview to 40 million people in Al Jazeera, and she has microphone anxiety.
I didn't have to hold the mic. You prepped me for this question, and yet it still feels like the hardest question that you could ask. I don't think I'm doing well. Oh, thank you so much. I don't think I'm doing well. I mean, I think I'm doing well, but also not. I don't think any of us are doing well at this point. I don't think any of us were doing well 6 months ago or 9 months ago. I feel really grateful to be here, to be home, to be safe. I feel really grateful for you and for Mecca and for everybody here. And it also feels incredibly hard knowing how many people did not get to go home and be safe. And worry about what was going on in Gaza was so palpable before I went. And now that I have so many connections and so much memory and so much love for so many people who were there in a very personal way, it feels pretty torturous to be here, you know? It feels like I'm half there, but in a really weird way. So I think I'm doing as expected.
I think that sounds like many of our experiences, but you, for your unique experience, because you were there and you made those connections with the community there, and we'll eventually get to that. There is that special kind of emotional connection that is hard, obviously, because you hear the news, you know what's going on. You know what's going on back home, as we say, probably in a way that most of us would never be able to understand. Okay, second hard question.
Yes.
And this is actually a question I really like asking people. It's like, because I'm interested in this question. It's like, how in the world did you get connected to Palestine? It's like, because there's always, I mean, as Palestinians, and Ziad will tell you this, we come out of the womb, I'm saying this to a midwife, we come out of the womb political. I mean, we come out of the womb fighting, right? So for us, it's like, it's an everyday thing, but like non-Palestinians, it's always an interesting kind of journey and trajectory. What was it for you?
I think it's pretty long-winded, actually. I think
So we got time.
I think the most important thing to remember is the interconnectedness of the Palestinian liberation movement with all other movements, with Black liberation, Indigenous liberation, and what I started organizing in college around anti-racist work, it's specifically around police brutality. I was in New York, so stop and frisk was something that we were constantly fighting against, and it was in the community there that I made friends who brought me to my first protest for Gaza at the Israeli consulate in New York in, like, I think 2012 it was. And that was the first time I'd even heard about Gaza, right? Like, this is not something that we are taught about in school. And I think even up to this point, there hasn't really been like a good entry point for collaborative coalition building. I feel like so many things have felt really siloed. And where my journey kind of took me was around what would eventually become Black Lives Matter movement. And my investment in that is actually what brought me to midwifery, is this idea of the importance of social justice and how healthcare can really be like a tangible extension of that work, specifically in a country like the United States, where Black pregnant and birthing people have extremely high, but like almost 4 times higher morbidity and mortality rates prenatally and perinatally than their white counterparts, and that is really what brought me into it. So I think that being primed as a midwife, being primed in learning from so many Black and Indigenous women, queer and trans folks about how to step into this work, when this genocide began in October, there was just a really clear call for a midwifery presence. I think that there's a clear call for a midwifery presence everywhere.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
But when you think about it, I mean, so much of what was activating as a healthcare provider, and I think that this is true for a lot of healthcare providers, and I think that this is what is happening now, is that so much of the news was about healthcare and is about healthcare, right? There is like a targeted and systematic attack on hospitals. They are literally bombing hospitals with patients inside of it. They are specifically seeking out and murdering doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers. And being in Gaza, the thing is that the hospital is the hub of everything, especially during this genocide. Like, the hospital is where everybody gets electricity. The hospital is where many people use the bathroom. Where I was in Rafah at Emirati Hospital is next to an UNRWA school, and literally women would just be coming in all day with their kids just to use the restroom. The postpartum unit that I worked in was where people came and plugged in their hot plates and made khobez, made bread. Like, everything is happening in the hospital. And so hearing early on about the 60,000 pregnant people who were in Gaza, who were having C-sections without anesthesia, who did not have access to NICU support for their newborns, it all just became very, very clear that a midwife was needed. Many midwives are needed.
Yeah, and I think you probably got this when you got there, and this is just part of the cultural Palestinian experience. Midwives are an extraordinary part of our culture, right? So you're stepping into something that is a little different than here, right?
Totally.
In terms of how midwives are respected and honored and what a central role midwives play. And I would actually make the argument that going as a midwife in some ways was absolutely more important than going as a trauma surgeon or an emergency doc or something like that. That's just my feeling. I'm a little biased, but
I appreciate the bias. It usually doesn't go in that direction, so.
yeah, I mean, that's part of my feeling, and I mean, I've talked to Bridget a lot about this, and if you think about like the contradiction of the genocide and the bearing witness to so much destruction and so much death. I mean, there isn't a single person in Gaza who isn't touched directly by a death of a loved one, a family member, something like that. And so for Palestinians in Gaza to have a midwife come all the way from the Bay Area and to help them bring into the world a life, that contradiction was profound. And it's that little bit of hope in the sea of so much pain and so much darkness that I think you brought. And I'm going to come back to that comment a little bit later. You know that, because I think that's such an important part of the experience. And you didn't know this, but you were doing a lot of mental health work by delivering babies in Gaza. Really profound work. I think for people here who may not know what it's like to get into Gaza, I wonder if you could describe a little bit about like the journey. Give us can you draw or paint a picture for us?
Sure, yeah. It's way easier getting in than it is getting out, I'll tell you that.
Let me just, the inside, not so inside joke is Bridget was supposed to go for 2 weeks, then a breakout of war happened and she got stranded for 2 more weeks. So when she says it's easier to get in than get out is an understatement, yeah.
Yeah. So I had a pretty broad experience in Gaza. I think that I saw quite a few things because of the time that I was there. I came in through the Rafah border crossing, which is now closed. So that is connecting Egypt to Gaza, to Rafah. And I flew into Cairo and took a UN convoy of about 55 total healthcare humanitarian aid workers up through the Sinai Desert. And
8 hours?
Yeah, 8 hours plus. There's a lot of cigarette breaks and a lot of checkpoints. And we, toward the last leg of the journey too, just like studded on the street. You could just see miles and miles of aid trucks of food that was just kind of rotting in the Egyptian desert. And getting through actually the Egyptian side of the border took like 6 hours. It was a very long day. And then we crossed over to Gaza, which was actually a really beautiful and like very like palpably, I don't even know how to describe it, but just like kind of breathtaking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, say a little bit about I completely identify with that description, but why was it breathtaking for you?
I don't know. It's and this is like a common thing, right? Like this is not just me. There's many people who have said this to me. A lot of people who come over. The earth just feels really generous and like really just like wise, and there's just, I don't know, something like palpably nurturing about it. And I think honestly, in a way, is something that probably contributes to kind of the resilience that is bred there. On like an energetic level, honestly, yeah.
Okay, so you go from the Bay Area, you go to Cairo, you take this 8+ hour ride through the desert, you get to Rafah, which is in the south of Gaza, sorry. I'm thinking about something else. So you're in the south.
Yeah.
The security situation and the situation on the ground, what struck you about when you got in, about just the immediacy of what was happening on the ground?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that when I got into Rafah, it was actually the safe place in Gaza, right? Like, this was the humanitarian hub. There were so many, like WHO, UN, everybody was working in Rafah, and so many people were displaced to Rafah that, Rafah is a pretty small place. Max population pre-genocide is like 300,000 people. And there was 800,000 plus people there. So just streets studded with like tents and like makeshift business and markets and that sort of thing. And the thing that struck me the most was just like the amount of children everywhere. And this is something that, like, I've said a few times before, it literally, minus the drones, it sounded like a playground because of like who was constantly just like playing around, just like running around in their little, groups, being very cute, running up to our bus, like saying hi. And so, yeah, immediately when I came in, things actually felt relatively calm. And everything was just booming and bustling. And the interesting thing is like within my first week there, everybody was celebrating and thought a ceasefire was going to happen, right? So it was the complete opposite of there being like a feeling of high security. There was like this like excitement and like potential relief that was happening. And being in the hospital, everybody was coming up to me and saying, did you hear about the encampments? Did you hear about what everybody's doing, all these universities? Like, this is what's happening. This is what's going to change things. This is going to end now.
So you felt like people in Gaza were aware of the activism and the work that we were doing globally in the encampments, like at Columbia and everything. They were aware of it.
Not only aware of it, like following it, like so excited about it. Al Jazeera plays, on the background of everything all the time, right? And like that was, what people were seeing and like were feeling so hopeful about, and the first thing anybody would bring up to me.
Yeah, the reason that's really important is because people come to me all the time and they say, well, we do all these protests, we do all these encampments, what difference does it make? And what I've always said to people is that those images of solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and 48 reverberate all the way back to Palestine. Because Palestinians in Gaza, it would be easy for them to feel alone, that the world has turned their back on them in the midst of a genocide, right? And yet, being connected to these encampments and you is that ability to see maybe someone does care, maybe the world is kind of pushing up against this kind of genocidal campaign against Palestinians. So people were aware of it.
Totally.
And would they talk to you about it?
Constantly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get there, you're only supposed to be, and I think you went there, you were supposed to go there for 2 weeks in April, right?
May. Yeah.
The first 2 weeks in May,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you get there, and so you work at one of the most elite L&D, labor and delivery services in the world, right? You get everything you need, right?
I was like, what are you talking about? I did not understand the sarcasm for a second. Yeah, that was it.
No, I mean, I'm talking in comparison, right?
Oh, in comparison.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yes.
I'm just
here.
I was being sarcastic and kind of talking about here, right? She thought, really? That was Gaza?
I must have missed something.
Yeah. Here, you work at an elite place.
Yeah.
I mean, it is considered, rightly or wrongly, kind of, that's another story. Rightly or wrongly, it's considered an elite, academic medical center, and, has great labor and delivery services, great I mean, again, this is what the top of the food chain in terms of medical care looks like. And then you go to Gaza, What did you see?
I saw a lot. I think that even to have a conversation about what I saw, it's important to really understand like what I should see, like what maternity care kind of should look like. And this is coming from a midwifery perspective. And the thing about midwives is that we believe that birth is like a physiologic event, right? It is not a medical crisis, which is kind of how the medical industry often paints it. And in order to kind of have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy birth, a lot of things have to be in place. There has to be a lot of preparation, and so that means prenatal care, it means diagnostic testing when needed, it means having nutrition to help your baby grow, your placenta grow, it means being well hydrated, it means nesting, right, and like getting your nursery ready or your house ready, buying the supplies that you need. None of that exists in Gaza, right? If you think about what you need in labor, there's a lot of things, but often peace and quiet, autonomy, dignity, being able to kind of control what is going on, to make decisions for yourself around your body and your baby, supportive presence. Studies have shown that having, in particular, like female family present during labor can really decrease interventions and increase, the chances of a normal delivery. And for when things aren't normal, access to important things, medications, medical supplies, sterile equipment, and none of that exists, right? And the thing that I think is like so complicated about what's going on in Gaza is that even prior to this genocide beginning, there was already a blockade that's like nearly 20 years old going on in Gaza. So there was already a deficit in nutrition as the Israeli government put Gazans on a diet of calorie restriction. There was already a deficit of like medical aid coming in, of supplies coming in. So on an already stressed system, this extreme amount of trauma and stress it's a catastrophic situation. What I saw in Rafah at Emirati Hospital was a group of extremely hardworking and dedicated staff, a lot of volunteer medical students and residents who had been displaced and were just showing up every day wherever they could, all hands on deck. I saw a maternity hospital that was built for a very small population that had 2 delivery rooms with 5 beds, and they were delivering 70 to 80 babies a day, right? And just like, I didn't always have hand soap. There wasn't cleaning supplies always. We did not have proper things to like cut and clamp a cord, which is a pretty basic thing that happens when a baby's born, right? And there was no room for, because of like overcrowding and because of how busy things were, there was no room for support people. And so many people have already lost their support people, right? I had a patient who I sat with in labor who cried the entire time because she was missing her mother, who was stuck above like this checkpoint that Israel has drawn dividing north and south, right? That nobody can pass. Her entire family was in the north, and she was alone without that support. That's really important. There also, because of the overcrowding, was not an abundance of time. And I think that one of the most important things when it comes to labor is really giving a person time to do their thing. Time, space, peace. And if there's only 5 beds and babies are coming out every second, the pressure's really on to keep things moving. And so I saw interventions happening that wouldn't be happening in a different setting just because there wasn't enough room, And not to mention sitting and laboring, giving birth while literally bombs are dropping in the background and drones are going off, and you have a very clear knowledge of the fact that a hospital isn't safe, right? It was overwhelming. Yeah.
So your days started early and ended late. I mean,
Yeah.
you put in a lot of hours and delivered a lot of babies. Can you talk a little bit about like what an average day was like for you?
I mean, it changed so much throughout the entire experience. But yeah, when I first started, it was coming in, waking up in the morning, taking our coordinated route to the hospital from our guest house.
So just so that you all have an idea about that, when Bridget says a coordinated route, what that means in reality is that the driver and the security person that's managing the drive from the guest house to the hospital is coordinating with the Israeli military, is coordinating with a special unit of the Israeli military, because nothing moves in Gaza from point A to point B. You can't even say safely. Nothing moves in Gaza without the Israelis knowing about it. And if you want the possibility of not being bombed, you coordinate. There's this coordination where you get permission before you're allowed to go from point A to point B. So that's before, that was during the good period too.
That was actually during the bad. At first, it wasn't that strict.
Okay.
Yeah, we could go wild.
Oh, you could
Not
go
really.
wild.
But there was a time frame, we give your coordinates 24 hours in advance. We will be here to be here during this different time.
And then you'd take the drive pretty early in the morning, and then you'd get to the hospital,
Yeah.
and then how many patients would be waiting for you?
It's hard to tell. I think that at the beginning there were too many to count. But what happened while I was there was that the invasion of East Rafah began, and the mass displacement out of Rafah began. So as the first kind of part of my trip started with like a huge amount of patients and just a lot of chaos, honestly, my last week there were no patients, right?
Does everybody kind of remember that point in time? Because as Bridget was saying, when you first got there that first week, Rafah was the air quotes, the safe spot, right? That's where everybody was told, was a safe place and was not part of the invasion. People were talking about, there's going to be a ceasefire, things are going to get better, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, and it really did. We heard the night that the Rafah border was actually like bombed and like besieged by Israel, we heard shelling that entire night. Like there was a lot of like direct combat going on, and it was far away from us. I mean, Gaza's the size of a Tic Tac, so like you think that things are really far away because you're like, oh, I'm so far east and actually, or so far west, and really like everything is like pretty close. But yeah, it was like we had this excitement, like, oh my God, there's going to be a ceasefire, to, oh my God, the border's closed and the ground invasion is happening, that Netanyahu had been threatening for months, right?
Right, and that was the Biden red line.
That was the Biden red line, yeah.
Right, that, if you guys remember that, just to put that in context, that's where Joe Biden forcefully tells Benjamin Netanyahu, you may not go into Rafah. And
he went into Rafah.
He went into Rafah,
yeah,
and killed a lot of people and dropped a lot of U.S. bombs.
Correct.
What was it like to I mean, just kind of curious. I mean, I know the experience, but I'm just curious what it was like for you.
I think, to be honest, I kind of was dissociated from it a little bit. Sorry, yes, thank you so much. I was going to say, to be honest, I kind of, at first it was really rough, and then I dissociated with it, and then I realized that I had such bad lockjaw from dissociating from it, that like I couldn't eat for 2 days actually while I was there.
Right.
You get pretty clamped up. There's just such a cacophony of sounds, right? So it's like first the drones, which are incessant and annoying,
24/7.
but then when they stop, it's really scary because it feels like something bad is about to happen. The bombing, to hear the bombing is like one thing, to feel it is something that's very different. And the longer I was there, the closer they got, and like, as you know, it would rattle you awake because the house would shake and the windows would fly open. The other thing that was like wildly upsetting and like psychologically really difficult were the quadcopters. So for those who don't know, quadcopters are drones that are equipped with like kind of like a speaker and a weapon, and like their normal drone surveillance. And they have like a soundtrack, the soundtrack that lures people out, and then they fire and kill people.
Sometimes it's a child's voice or a baby's voice, yeah.
It's like a woman crying for help, a dog moaning in pain, and a baby crying, and like, that's the one that I heard the most. And I remember the first night being like, why isn't anybody attending to this baby? Like, I could totally understand doing that, like running out into that. And, you know, quadcopters killed multiple people and attacked multiple people in Rafah while I was there at the hospital that I was working at, and European hospital nearby. Yeah.
That must have been a very harrowing period for you. I'm gonna kind of try to get to the next couple of weeks and then come back to the medical care.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to be there for 2 weeks. The first week, you know, you got to do some of what you were tasked to do. You delivered a lot of babies in that week. Then the invasion starts. You're supposed to leave after 2 weeks. It didn't happen.
No.
What happened?
I mean, what happened is when the invasion started, the WHO said, we're going to do an emergency evacuation of healthcare workers. So then I was like, oh, I guess I'm leaving early. And that was actually really upsetting for me. And making the decision to like put my name on that list was really hard. And then, and then I never left, essentially, right? And then I stayed. I think that point was particularly scary because we just didn't know what was next, what was going to happen. And, you know, the nightly ritual was like packing our go bags and like making sure that we were dressed appropriately for if we had to run out. It was getting new housing and moving and evacuating ourselves. And it was watching kind of the terror encroach into Rafah, and to also watch the displacement of so many people from Rafah. And, you know, there was just like a lot of constant up and downs, and a lot of like geopolitical uncertainty that felt very personal.
Yeah, say a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think that, you know, one of the experiences, and I say this knowing that like I had a huge amount of privilege being in Gaza, right? Like, I'm a white woman with an American passport. Like, I knew that I was going to be okay, and I knew that I was going to get out at some point. And I knew that if I died, that it would be an accident for the most part. This is what I felt convicted around. Who knows? But, you know, just like the amount of ups and downs and like betrayals, I think, is like really difficult and kind of parallel to this Palestinian experience, right? Where just like your fate is in the hands of these actors who don't really care about you, you know? As Rafah border closed and, you know, any semblance of an exit for me went out the window, my family was calling the State Department, all of this stuff was happening, you know, everybody was trying to get things moving, and it just kind of was like roulette, like we didn't know what would happen. And it wasn't scary, I felt angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to give people a sense of it, so the Israeli military took over the Rafah crossing. So usually that crossing is something that is monitored by the Egyptians and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
That got totally shut down. So the idea that you might somehow exit through Rafah was becoming more problematic every single day, right, after that invasion.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it might have been challenging, those ups and downs, to put it mildly.
It was. And also, perspective made it difficult to really feel that, right? Because again, like, I knew that I was gonna go home someday. Like, and I knew what I was going home to. And I knew that, like, safety would be at the end of the road for the most part. And that is just not what Palestinians experience.
Right.
And even with that, the minute that Rafah border crossing was closed, every day I went into work, the people that I worked with who were being displaced, who had been displaced 8, 12, whatever times over, their biggest concern every time I came in was me.
Wow.
Worried about you. I just really hope that you can go home, inshallah. Let's, like, whatever, oh, it's gonna be okay. Oh, are you okay? What can I do for you, And so it makes kind of like sitting in your own upset or anger about your situation a little bit moot, right?
Well, that's a good segue to me asking you about your experience of Palestinian hospitality.
I love it.
I mean...
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Oh, really? So you're saying that an Airbnb in Gaza is a 10 out of a 10? Wow. Yeah. I would give the 10 out of 10 since, I've been going to Gaza for 25 years, so the hospitality is extraordinary. And I just wonder what it was like for you to be connected to that kind of an experience in the community in the middle of a war, in the middle of a genocide. And again, we're always talking about like contradictions, right? Because so many contradictions in Palestine, right? What was that like for you?
It was amazing, honestly, right? Like, it was, the amount of generosity was unparalleled in many ways. These are people who are experiencing famine, like bringing me food, These are people who have been displaced many times over, who were like leaving their shift in the middle of the hospital to relocate their family and are still worried about me and are sending me WhatsApp messages making sure I'm okay. There is just like such a sweetness and such a community focus, and like a very family-oriented culture, but like everybody is family, that it was really, I felt very lucky to be the recipient of,
Wow. Incredible to think about that kind of generosity and sense of belonging in the middle of all this other chaos that's going on around you. That's incredible. Do you mind if we kind of shift to some more difficult topics? Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Because, labor and delivering babies in the middle of a war and genocide is not easy, and there probably were some difficult moments for you. I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that.
Yeah, I think that it is incredibly difficult to give birth during a genocide, and I also think that for me, being involved in birth work was very protective, right? Like, I was in the emergency room for one day, and they kicked me out because I have nothing to help with. But birth, even in the worst of times, is still like a moment of joy and really important transition and hope. And even though birth can be life or death, like, there is something just like really, really sweet and special about it, no matter what. I think that one story that really illustrates birth in Gaza is not of a birth that I attended, but of a baby that I met. So Emirati Hospital's maternity ward, but also has 2 different NICUs, so neonatal intensive care units. And there was one baby that I met there, and he was about 6 months old when I met him. And he had been born prematurely in a taxi on his mom's way to Kamal Adwan Hospital, like very, very north. This is like above Jabalia. And this was at the time that the hospital was being seized and sieged. And the mom pulls up, baby's coming out, and a pediatrician just so happens to be outside, helping navigate out the other babies from the NICU who they actually are going to transport down to Rafah. And this is the mom's first baby. And she looks at the pediatrician and she says, "Take him." And this is very north, right? So babies being evacuated were not accompanied because no adult Palestinians could cross the line. Even doctors could not evacuate. It was only paramedics. And this pediatrician, pretended to be a paramedic and got in the ambulance with this baby and many others and went to Emirati. And that baby, when I met him, 5.5 months old, had never left the neonatal intensive care unit at Emirati. And all of the nurses were his mother. Every day as a new shift came on, somebody else's responsibility to take care of him. He wasn't there for any medical need. And it was so beautiful to see everybody tending to him. And I think it's another thing about this Palestinian focus on family and community, right? And the most unfortunate thing is that, his mom's still alive but cannot access him. And thought that Rafah was the safest place for him. And when Emirati was evacuated, they had to put him in a orphanage. And these are the decisions that you have to make, right? As a mom giving birth. I also just think about actually one of the first patients that I had in labor. It was also her first time having a baby. She hadn't had any prenatal care because prenatal care does not exist in Gaza, period. And she kind of was progressing very normally and then wasn't, and the baby kind of wasn't coming down into the pelvis. And fetal heart rate deceleration started happening, and we decided to move towards a C-section. And the baby wasn't descending into the pelvis because it had hydrocephalus, so extra kind of fluid and water in the head, right? And hydrocephalus isn't great, but it's very treatable. There's shunt surgeries. It's happening, down the street at Children's Oakland all the time. But that's not a surgery that is currently possible in Gaza. So that baby died. And there was no preparation for it, right? There was no diagnostic testing that was going on, That mother just was going in to give birth, and this was something, completely unknown, and something that would otherwise be assessed prenatally. And that's giving birth in Gaza.
That's an extraordinary story, Bridget, because people, and you spoke a little bit about this at the beginning about what it's like to give, what L&D is like here in the Bay, right? And at most places in the United States. And we still have asymmetries in maternal outcome, and child outcomes here because of the racial inequities. That's magnified to 1,000% in Gaza, right?
Yeah.
Because you alluded to it, and I think many of you know this, but it's for those that don't. Bridget mentioned that Gaza's been under total siege since 2005. That the ability to get medical care is severely limited for the last 16, 17 years. That, as Bridget mentioned, there's been a starvation diet. That 80% of Palestinian children before October 7th were living on less than $2 a day in Gaza. So they were on that starvation diet that's much worse now, obviously, but they weren't getting adequate nutrition. Pregnant women were not getting adequate nutrition. This is all before October 7th.
Right.
And then October 7th happens. Wow.
And then May 7th happened, right? And that was the day that Rafah border crossing closed. And it just keeps getting worse because although it wasn't great, it was what they had, and at least some food was coming in. Medical delegations were coming in. The only way medical supplies were getting into Gaza until May 7th was on the backs of healthcare workers who were rotating in. There was consistency in that schedule. People were able to come in and come out. Supplies were coming in. I came in with like, I don't know, I think they gave me like 10 suitcases, right? At this point, now that that border crossing is closed, the amount of workers that can come in have sharply declined, and they can't bring any supplies in anymore. They're allowed one suitcase. So there's literally no medical supplies getting in. And, you know, as of this week, I believe the UN has officially declared, like, no longer just specific to the north, but the entirety of Gaza is under famine.
It is 500,000 are experiencing level 5 famine right now.
Yeah.
And again, if you're okay with this, I want to just ask you what it's like to work in a labor and delivery unit without anesthesia, without diagnostics, without were you able to do emergency C-sections?
We did.
Without anesthesia?
No, in the south there was anesthesia.
You did have a little
It's just not in the
anesthesia?
north,
Okay.
yeah.
What was that like?
You know, the one thing about birth is that birth just kind of happens. You know, every birth in Gaza is a high-risk birth because of the lack of prenatal care, nutrition, and all of these things. Without the lack of testing, the rampant increase in hypertensive disorders related to the trauma and stress that's going on. The rampant increase in preterm birth related to kind of the trauma and stress that's going on. But as you know, as midwives know, like, birth is normal and it can kind of happen anywhere and it'll be okay. And I think that a lot of what I saw was also really like normal and beautiful.
Normal and beautiful.
But it just was very low tech. You know, patients would have to switch off who was going to use the fetal heart rate monitor. Even like while receiving like Pitocin, which is the medication that causes contractions, you're supposed to kind of keep the monitor on the whole time when that happens, you know?
Right.
But there's like not enough monitors. So we're switching off from person to person. It looked like, you know, trying to make do with what you could and using what supplies that you could, although there was very few. And it looked like, I think, a lot of stuff probably slipping through the cracks, right? In particular in the postpartum period, where patients stuck around for like 2 hours. Nobody really kind of had capacity to look at them or see how they were doing because they were too busy delivering other babies. And then they just walk home to their tent, you know?
But Bridget, your story is so extraordinary, and the idea and the fact that you were able to go and help give birth to Palestinian children in the midst of a genocide is really an extraordinary story. I don't even know if you've had time to reflect on what that really means. I mean, have you been able to think about it much since you got back?
To some extent, I think that it's really a privilege more than anything, you know?
Yeah. But the idea of kind of giving birth while so much destruction is going on at the same time is really extraordinary. And I just want to say from me and on behalf of the Palestinian community here and the diaspora and back home, we so appreciate, as you know, Ziad said, you know, when many people were running away from Palestine, you ran to Gaza. And, you know, we're always going to be grateful to you for doing that. So thank you very much. Do we have some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a good question for you, Bridget. Pre-genocide, it seems so bizarre to talk about pre-genocide, but pre-genocide, were most babies birthed at home or in hospital?
Most in Gaza?
In Gaza, yeah.
In hospital, I would say.
Most were born in hospital.
The thing that we have to realize, again, is that this siege has led to pretty like colonial medical health care practices that are going on in Gaza, right? And so that means hospital birth.
And did you get a sense in talking with your colleagues there? Did you meet any other midwives while you were there? and tell us a little bit about traditional midwifery in Gaza.
Yeah, so a lot of the people you saw on the screen earlier were all midwives that I worked with. Midwifery is just so much more ubiquitous in Gaza. Like, midwives manage so many births, and there's so many births. And, you know, differences are that midwives usually have like an associate's degree, so they go through the program really quickly and learn from a very young age. And, you know, still, they're the keepers of such important knowledge, and still, you know, they know all of the amazing tricks of the trade. They know better than most doctors. It's, yeah.
This last question I might take because it says, is it practical to send lightweight medical supplies, you know, to Gaza now? And I'll tell you that here in the Bay, we have established a network of medical supply drives. And so we are collecting medical supplies. We just sent, I think, almost $100,000 worth of medical supplies to a warehouse in Chicago that is going to be ready to get to Gaza when it's ready. So when it's ready to go. Thanks. So if you're interested in participating in that, we're collecting both funds as well as actual supplies. So if you're a healthcare worker and you have access to supplies, let me know, let Bridget know. Also, Ziad, is it okay if people can make a donation to Mecca specifically to help with medical supplies, or should we not do that? What do you think? Well, he's the boss, so, okay. Next question. I can't read that. Handwriting, sorry. That question's not gonna work. If your handwriting isn't good, it's not gonna happen. Okay, this is actually a good question. So, but it's a hard question. So I'll just ask it without context. Do you have hope since coming back? What do you think?
On a personal level, no. I think that everything that I did there just felt like such a drop in the bucket. Like, it just kind of was like, it was overwhelming. On a collective level, yes.
What gives you hope after seeing what you saw in Gaza? Not collectively so much, but what did you see there that gave you hope?
I mean, so many people's hope, right? So many people's resilience. And also just being surrounded by people who are constantly in their dignity. I think that was something like really special in particular that I learned, and I've been thinking about a lot since I've come back, is like dignity. And dignity to just, to fight for who you are, you know, and your value. I think that's what gave me hope. And this gives me hope, you know, being here. I think that there is a collectiveness that is happening and culminating, although it's like ebbing and flowing as things get difficult, as the election gets overwhelming. I believe in us.
Yeah, I think we get it, yeah. Whoever wrote this question, it's my favorite one.
Wow.
Are you nervous?
No.
Okay. I don't know any nervous midwives. They're all pretty chill.
Only mic nervousness, nothing else.
So this is a great question. I think it's a statement that many of us, if not most of us, feel. Thank you for being who you are. What can your community do for you now? How can we be there for you? It's a great question.
It's very sweet.
What do you need?
Thank you.
I've asked you that a million times, by the way, so you should have an answer.
What I need actually is collective action so I don't have to worry as much. You know? Although I have not physically been in the fetal position, I mentally have been in the fetal position for the last, like, I don't know, it's been like 5 weeks since I've been back, 6 weeks. And it's been hard to kind of operate. And also just like the secondary arrow of like shame and guilt that I am not like operating more, given how catastrophic things are, given the fact that we have just normalized Rafah, border crossing is closed. Like, I just think that there's like, again, because of so much going on, there's like a new wave of like, I don't know, overwhelm, complacency, whatever. And I just think that becoming reactivated would be a huge relief for me and would really help me be able to, to take care of myself, honestly. So yeah.
So you want us all to get reactivated for Gaza again?
Yes.
I think I'm ready for that. Yeah, you know, I alluded to that a little bit in my opening comments because, yeah, there's this complicity that goes on with the political elite here, and with the media elite. You know, to just we're just not going to talk about Gaza anymore, even though the situation there is significantly and appreciably worse right now. You know. As I said before, conservative, there probably is 186,000 people that have died and 20,000 missing children. We don't know where 20,000 children are right now. That's how horrific it is. So I'm with you on that. I think that would help me feel a lot better too. Oh, should I tell the story about like how we first connected?
Sure.
So we're speaking of like raising hell. I mean, so even before Bridget decides that she's going to go to Gaza, she contacts me because we're raising hell at UCSF, right? We're trying to, yeah, for real. Don't get me started. We're raising hell at UCSF. Why? Because I know, they feel like, you know, even though we're a world-class health institution committed to health worldwide, that's their tagline, but they put a little asterisk, and it says, except for Palestine. So we've been raising hell over there. So Bridget, in her extraordinariness, decides that she's going to do this thing. She's going to wear a little pin, and it's going to be this outrageous image just to like scare the hell out of everybody. Do you know what that image is? Watermelon, seasonal fruit. So yeah, seasonal fruit is really frightening all of a sudden. So anyways, so she's wearing seasonal fruit. Her supervisor's concerned about it. Not concerned about genocide, by the way. Not concerned about health inequities in Bayview, Hunters Point, and, you know, the Western Addition or East Oakland, but more worried about seasonal fruit. So that's when I got my first contact with Bridget, which was great. I mean, it's just like, I won't use all the words because this is being videotaped, but can you fricking believe that this is happening? So that was kind of interesting, right? I mean, and this is part of the fight that we're all in right now about advocating for Palestine and for Gaza and for being in solidarity. People are so freaked out that when they see a watermelon, they're trying to say to us that they feel unsafe. Now, let's not confuse feeling uncomfortable, which you should feel uncomfortable because it is a genocide, with feeling unsafe. So anyways, I thought that was I hope I didn't do too much disservice to that first story.
No.
Is that okay?
Yes.
This is an interesting story. Question. Maybe you have something to say about this. What was, because there's so much talk about, food insecurity in Gaza and stuff like that. People had some concerns about you and your food insecurity when you were there. How was that for you?
I was fine. I brought a suitcase full of tuna.
That was your go-to?
I have so much tuna.
Okay.
I think I have mercury poisoning now. And also, the other part of it was that I was fed, right? People brought us food all the time. We were totally fine.
You were okay?
And Palestinian food is delicious.
You don't have to convince me. I'm with you on that. Okay, this is an interesting question. You already touched on it a little bit, but I don't know if you want to expand on it a little bit. But there's prenatal care, and then there's postnatal care, right? So I could say a little bit about the postnatal care before October 7th. Not too bad, actually, in terms of postnatal care before October 7th. I would say the ability to kind of have that sense of community, to have access to basic care was actually, in the Gaza context, it was possible at least. Did you get any sense of the possibility of postnatal care when you were there?
There wasn't any. Like I said, even in the hospital, there was a 2-hour window that you could be there postpartum, 6 hours if there was a complication. Postnatal care when it comes to a baby, like a NICU, sometimes there wasn't enough room, and especially, given the fact that Gaza runs off of gas. And as Rafah border was closed, our kind of gas supply completely depleted, and gas is what charges generators, and generators is what causes hospitals to operate and incubators to keep running. So even that didn't really exist. Malnutrition and dehydration also lead to a decrease in milk supply, and no running clean water, no sanitation means bringing a baby home. And your recovering body postpartum to an area that's high risk for hepatitis A, which is now endemic to Gaza. So many other waterborne diseases, vaginitis for women, which has increased drastically because of the lack of running water. Nothing really significant, as any kind of ancillary primary care has been completely shut down, and everything has been shunted to kind of emergency medicine because of the mass casualty events that are happening on a daily basis.
Wow. Okay, we're transitioning here, everybody, and I want to just say a few things. I'm going to save my comments about Bridget for last, so just bear with me for a minute. Being in community with all of you this evening is really extraordinary, and I'm hoping you felt that love this evening, because we love you. And
I love you, thank you.
And we're in community with you, and we're going to be shoulder to shoulder with you in all of these fights until Palestine is free. You know that. And I'm going to ask your parents to close their ears right now with the next thing I'm going to say.
Okay.
She's already talking about going back. So y'all need to know that. So But I really, we couldn't do something like this without Mecca, without the Middle Eastern Children's Alliance. So can we have a big round of applause for Ziad? But I really, so Middle Eastern Children's Alliance, Eyewitness Palestine, we're all kind of working together to send our next delegations to Gaza, because we're now already thinking about rebuilding the healthcare infrastructure in Gaza, right? So please, please, please give generously. I am very careful about who I say please give money to when it comes to Palestine. We have to be, right? And the Middle Eastern Children's Alliance and Ziad Abbas are people that, not only that I trust, because I trust you, Ziad, with my life, you know that. But this is an organization that has experience on the ground in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the camps. And it's the kind of organization that you can trust and believe in, and they need your support. So I hope that you'll give, and I hope you'll give generously. And then last of all, you know, Bridget, I don't know what to say. I'm just so appreciative of you. I really am. So glad.
And I love you. Thank you so much.
And make sure you stop by the table in the back to pick up some things. And thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you so much.